beautiful as it ever was. And now we're going to get to tie it all together with our environmental research program. I'm an American archaeologist, and I began working in Ireland in the late 70s. And in 1982, officially began what we call the Valley Lock Project. So the assumption when we came here was that, in fact, people hadn't come down to here, to the southeast, until about the Bronze Age, which would have been about 3,000 years ago. What we used to do is ride all the roads. So we would locate plowed fields, and we would walk on the fields and look for stone tools, and we began finding hundreds of them. Tools that go back to the origins or the beginnings of Irish settlement, which was about 10,000 years ago. So we actually extended the history of the area another 6,000 or 7,000 years. So we knew we were onto something. So right now I'm sitting at the foot of Knockavillish Head, and our research area extends from here down Fornott Strand to Creighton Head. The last excavation we had a crew of 45, worked a lot with the Waterford community, especially Dunmore. And what we found was the people were just so proud of their heritage. This area of Ireland was really sort of ignored historically. My wife and I came back in 2016. We met a man named Noel McDonough, who was an amateur archaeologist.
Noel McDonough was a fisherman. He loved to come here and watch the tides. And he became fascinated with how much was being revealed with these big storms that are being driven by our rapid climate change. He took us to see his artifacts. It's an entire shed with things bagged, labeled. It was incredible. We were doing this systematic survey, so where we'd have students, walking 5 meters apart across fields. So when Noel was collecting, he would walk until he found something, and then in his own Celtic way, he would spiral out like this, like the rocks, like the decorations on the Neolithic tombs. And he wouldn't stop collecting until his spiral, until he stopped finding artifacts.
He did it for the love of it and the passion, and because it was so personally important to him. In 2016, we decided to collaborate with him and try to meld the two areas. We found tens of thousands of artifacts. Noel, in his research, also found probably as many. It told us they were hunter-gatherers and fishers, so they lived off the natural resources.
When you swim out half a mile and then turn around, it's a completely different perspective. And clearly the people in the past, they had both of these perspectives. They were always out there on the sea, whether it's for fishing or for travel. And they had this perspective looking out from the land. My primary perspective has always been a landscape perspective. So what I really wanted to do is find a place where I can relate the objects from the collection back to where they came from in the landscape, and therefore understand the relationship. What is it about the places, and how do the objects relate? What stories can we tell? People 7,000, 8,000 years ago, maybe sitting around a campfire, had been making objects, having conversations, planning the next day. So now the plan is really to try and integrate these two collections and the places where they came from. The Ballylock project, what they did is they recorded it by field, so therefore it's much more precise. So I could actually go stand in a field, which is an acre, half an acre, and I know pretty well the nature of the location. This is a band flag, a butt-trimmed flag, a late Mesolithic object, which came from one of the fields that Noel McDonough walked. And the writing on this one, as well as every other object of the 5,500 that Noel picked up, the writing tells us that it's from Fornocht. It tells us which number of the fields, so it's field number 4.
This is the first time that I've seen the material from the McDonough collection with Thomas. With the South East Island collections, they are quite dense and condensed. On the Welsh side, we are much more dispersed and spread out. It has been a kind of creative process, really. Thomas and I are sitting here today looking at the McDonough collection. I'll go back to Cardigan and I'll go and have a look at some of our collections. I think from what Thomas and I have looked at this morning, we're seeing a lot of Neolithic.
The Mesolithic is always harder to find. It's more remote and less visible. And there was a perception until quite recently that Ireland was actually quite isolated in earlier prehistory, that there was very little links with anywhere outside of Ireland, that people arrived in the early Mesolithic and then sort of stayed put, but cut off contact. That perception has been challenged. I think what's really interesting is these two regions, the southeast corner of Ireland and Western Wales, they are obviously connected by the Irish Sea, right? And nobody has ever looked at those connections in any level of detail, because we know that people did travel across the Irish Sea, they did cross at various stages, and technology was available to make those crossings.
Our job is to link the distribution of the artifacts and the evidence of human settlement and occupation to a landscape that is significantly different than the one that they encountered. As most people know, sea level is rising, and the rate of sea level rise is linked to certain types of changes in the landscape. So that when the people were here or arrived here 10,000 years ago, they were looking at a sea level that was lower. When that sea level started to rise, the little environments that are part of the estuary changed. And over the course of time, as sea level encroaches and advances, people move with respect to that. So our job is to look at the sediments underneath the present ground and underneath the estuary to see where land was.
The coring is taking place in close proximity to known archaeological sites. If there's a potential for uncovering archaeological sites, any of those works would have to be carried out under licence from the National Monument Service. Because of that, Joe took Mizzen Archaeology on.
The hole is open.
The hole's open, and you're measuring it all the way down?
You must be pushing it away.
We ensure that any of the coring don't impact on the Bronze Age Phylloxera.
We're really excited. It's an outstanding opportunity to put together several sets of data that will give us a tremendous insight into how people lived and in what settings they lived.
We're getting nice deep sediments, and the sediments that we're bringing up are a dark gray color, which means there's a lot of organic material in them, so we can date them, which is what's going to be the most important data.
We found it. We found it.
You found the sunken forest?
Yeah.
Are you on it now?
1 meter down.
Oh my God.
This is what was found. We cored in the area that was just off the heart of the Phylloxera, expecting to find what had been previously identified as buried forest, would give us a complete connection between the Phylloxera, the buried forest, and the edge of the cove that we identified through these sediments. So this, in a sense, could be called a missing link between those two pieces of information. And this is what we were really looking for. You don't always find it. In this case, we kind of did. We know that it's part of a more extensive landscape that was forested at one time and is probably, in all likelihood, associated with the archaeology. This is just the beginning, but we're working on putting together the pieces of the puzzle. I think the most important thing that we found is we found sort of all the hints of this landscape being here.
And we're only halfway through. We still now need to link up what we found today with the
Right.